A man died in Oklahoma in 1958, 97 years old. 1,000 people came to his funeral. What no one there knew was the secret life he had lived, or the 6 men he had killed. The story begins in 1868. The Civil War had ended 3 years earlier, but on the border between Kansas and Missouri, it had never really stopped. It had just changed clothes. Some had ridden with Quantrill's raiders. They scattered after the war, calling themselves regulators. The truth was simpler. They were men who had learned to kill during the war, and they saw no reason to stop. In Twin Mound, Kansas, an abolitionist family arrived from Connecticut. The father had helped men escape to freedom. He had made enemies along the way. He had a son. The boy was 8 years old. They did not know it yet, but they were already being watched. 6 men rode out of the Missouri hills on an October morning. Former guerrillas with old rifles and nothing left to believe in, except the old hatreds. They found the abolitionist on the road outside Twin Mound. He was alone. One of them raised a rifle. The sound echoed across the flat Kansas prairie, and then there was nothing but silence. The 8-year-old boy had followed at a distance. He had seen everything. He stood in the tall grass at the edge of the road and watched his father fall. He did not cry out. He did not run. He simply stood there, small and still, as the 6 men rode away into the morning. He memorized their faces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then they were gone, and the boy remained. That night, a man named Mose Beeman came to where the boy was staying. Mose had known his father, had ridden with him, fought beside him. When he looked at the child sitting silent in the corner, something hardened inside him. He walked to the boy. He looked down at him, and he said words that would follow him for the rest of his life. "My boy, may an old man's curse rest upon you, if you do not try to avenge your father." Then Mose reached into his coat and pulled out a Navy Colt revolver, a 6-shooter. He pressed it into the boy's hands. It was heavy. It was cold. The boy was 8 years old, and the gun was nearly as tall as his forearm. But he did not put it down. Mose Beeman began teaching him that same night how to hold it, how to draw it, how to aim without looking. Point and fire, until his hand knew the weight of the barrel and his eye knew the line of the sight. This was not a game. This was a mission. Over the years that followed, the boy became something the frontier rarely produced, a prodigy. He did not just learn to shoot. He mastered it. He trained every single day, drawing the Navy Colt, leveling it, squeezing the trigger in one fluid motion. No wasted movement, no hesitation. By 12, he could put a bullet through a copper wire at 20 paces. By 14, men twice his age stopped challenging him. Everywhere he went, he asked questions. Where did those 6 men go? Which towns did they drink in? He collected these fragments the way a man collects gold, carefully, 1 grain at a time. He was building towards 6 men, and he was not going to forget any of them. When Frank Eaton was 15, he walked 17 miles to Fort Gibson, a cavalry outpost in the Oklahoma Territory. The soldiers there were the best marksmen in the United States Army. The Indian Territory was the most dangerous posting in the country. They laughed when the skinny boy signed up for the shooting competition. The competition lasted 3 days. On the first day, Frank outshot 11 corporals. On the second, the sergeants. On the third, the best sharpshooter in the regiment. Frank beat him too. Colonel Coppinger stepped forward, placed the marksmanship medal around his neck, and looked at the boy with steady hands and quiet eyes. "You've got Pistol Pete written all over you." Frank Boardman Eaton had come to Fort Gibson as a boy. He left with a name that would outlast everything. The years that followed were the years of the hunt. Frank tracked the first man down in 1879. The man was living under a false name in southern Kansas. He did not recognize Frank. The last time they had been in the same place, Frank had been a child. Frank walked into the saloon. He did not start a conversation. He did not issue a warning. He stepped through the door and shot him where he stood. Over the next 8 years, Frank tracked down each of the remaining 5 men. Some died in gunfights, some in alleys. One was killed by someone else over a card game. Frank heard about it and rode 40 miles to attend the funeral just to make sure. By 1887, 19 years after his father was killed, 5 of the 6 men were dead. Frank Eaton was 27. He had spent 2 decades with one purpose, and now that purpose was nearly finished. The land run of 1889 changed everything. On a single day in April, thousands raced across the Oklahoma border to stake their claims. Frank Eaton was 29. He rode northwest knowing exactly where he wanted to go. He staked his claim near Perkins, built a farmhouse, and was appointed sheriff within a year. He married twice. His first wife died in 1902. He married Anna the following year, and together they had 8 more children. 9 children total. 31 grandchildren would follow. The children of Perkins knew Frank as the old man on the porch. Sitting in his chair in the evenings, neighborhood children gathered around him, begging him to tell them about the old days. Frank would talk. He did not talk about the killing. In 1950, when Frank was 90, he started a newspaper column called Pistol Pete Says. He wrote it by hand, letter by letter, on an old press. He wrote about the country, the wide open spaces, the endless skies, the quality of light on the prairie at dawn. The column ran for 6 years. That legacy was cemented 34 years earlier, in 1923. 63-year-old Frank rode in the Stillwater Armistice Day Parade. In the crowd, Oklahoma AANDM students watched him, an old cowboy on an old horse, riding with the easy confidence of a man who had spent his life in the saddle. They had been looking for a mascot. They looked at Frank. They looked at each other. They had found their man. In 1958, the same year Frank died, Oklahoma NDM adopted him as their mascot. They painted his face on gymnasium walls. They stitched his name into fight songs. They taught students to scream Pistol Pete at football games and never know where the name came from. Frank Boardman Eaton died on April 8, 1958. He was 97. He died in his sleep, in the farmhouse he had built more than 60 years earlier, surrounded by family. More than 1,000 people came to the funeral, and on autumn Saturdays in Stillwater, tens of thousands still gather. They wear orange and maroon. The band strikes up. The mascot runs onto the field. Pistol Pete. No one in that stadium knows the real story, but the story is still there. It always was.